Most academics don't fail because they're lazy. Far from it. They fail because their system is absolute chaos. You go onto somebody's laptop, you open up the Files tab, and what you're greeted with are hundreds of files with no real system in how to organize them. You go into a lab and you ask a person something about something they did a couple of weeks ago, maybe an experiment. Immediately they start sifting through lab books, little personal notebooks, scraps of paper. They can't find what they're looking for. Some people have a notebook for their lab work, a notebook for journal club, a notebook for that conference they went to. It was a free notebook. They picked it up, wrote all their notes in it, and then they lost it immediately. And almost every academic I know, students included, have a stack of PDFs, one for each scientific paper that they never read and they're never going to read. You see, most academics lack a cohesive system of how to capture ideas, capture knowledge, capture notes, events, tasks, and integrate them seamlessly, whether that's in a notebook or on their computer. This is something I struggled with when I was a PhD student, but I slowly built a system that worked for me. And today I'm going to share it with you. Hello, my name is Dean, and I am on a mission to turn academics into proper adults. So let's start with day-to-day tasks and notes. How do you capture them? How do you organize them? Well, the system I use is Bujo, which stands for Bullet Journal. Now, for many years, I've kept a journal myself, normally just little lined notebooks that I wrote down how I was feeling that day, maybe some tasks, to-dos, and some reminders. But what I found was in my own journaling system, I was always trying to come up with a way to organize these different things. You know, ideas you come up with in the shower are very different from tasks that absolutely have to be done that day. So how can you store them and how can you easily differentiate between them? A few years back, somebody bought me a bullet journal as a gift. And initially, I didn't really like it. I thought, no, I like lined notebooks. That's how I record my notes. But as I began to understand the system behind it, I began to appreciate that this was a very powerful protocol, a very powerful way of doing things. And since I've started using it, I am now on top of all my tasks. And you can be too. So here's how the system works. At the very front of your bullet journal, there will be an area called index. Okay, this is the productivity and organization key that ties everything together, but more on this later. Right after the index is the future log section. Okay, so this is where you get a glance at the entire year. So this is the most zoomed out view of your year possible. You can divide each page into thirds, and each third represents a particular month. And if you want, you can split this up so that each page contains a season as well. That's the way I like to do it. After that, what I like to do is create a more zoomed in view of each particular month. Here you can see the outline for October. The left-hand page is for noting down the key dates, okay? And you can tie in events and tasks to specific dates. The right-hand page, that's more for, okay, maybe you have something that you want to get done that month, but it's not tied to a particular day. That's where you would put that. Or maybe some focuses you have for personal development, things like that. You can write them down the right-hand side of the page. After the zoom in on the particular month, after that point, each page begins with the date, so the day, the month, and the name of the day, and then everything associated with that day. Tasks, notes, and events. Here, a dot represents a task. So once you've completed a task, a simple X to cross it out reminds you that that task has been completed. And within this daily view, you can note down various types of information. And the key for how you organize different types of information, that's included at the start of the notebook as well. A simple dot represents a task. And once completed, you can put an X through it, you can cross it out. That shows you and reminds you that the task has been completed. Now, let's say you have a task that day and you note it down, but then it turns out you don't actually need to complete it until tomorrow or a couple of days' time. Well, you draw a simple arrow to the right, showing you that you have scheduled that task for a later date. And then you would put it into the later date after that. Now, let's say the task has been migrated even further into the future. What you would do is put an arrow to the left, and then you would go back to your monthly view or your yearly overview and move that task into there. And if the task becomes irrelevant, if for some reason you don't need to attend to it anymore, a simple line through will suffice. Notes are represented by a dash. Events are represented by a circle. And if you want to use an asterisk to mark priority items, you can do that as well. Now, because I use this as a perfect system to capture both personal and professional information, I sometimes run into issues. Okay, so here's an example of an issue you might run into. I read a lot. I read a lot of books, and I like to note down what I'm thinking about when I'm reading those books, maybe key lessons I'm taking from them in my bullet journal. Now, you can probably already guess what problem we're going to have is that, I'm one of those people, probably like most people, I don't finish a book the same day I start reading it. Okay, takes me a couple of weeks usually to read a book. So what am I going to do then if I've started writing my notes about a book on a particular page associated with a particular date, and then 3 days later I pick up the book again? How am I going to be able to flick from note to note and go through all the notes together without having to search back and forward through the bullet journal? Well, this is where the index comes in. In the index, what I use it for is I note the page numbers of when each month begins, but also when key events or notes are stored. So here you can see For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway, and I have noted down the different page numbers. So if we go to any of these pages, page 65 for example, you will actually see the notes that are kept there. And this allows you to jump from page to page and find all of your notes on a particular topic at once, even if they were recorded on different dates. Now, there's a great quote out there: the human mind, the human brain is for having ideas, not for capturing them. And that's why I love using my bullet journal, because it allows me to, whether I'm out for a walk or in the middle of a meeting, if an idea just pops into my head, I don't have to rely on myself to remember it. I can store it in my bullet journal, and I know I'll be able to find it later. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, listen, Dean, that's all well and good. That's a lovely notebook, but I'm an academic, or I'm a student, or I'm a lecturer. Most of my stuff is stored digitally. Okay, so a notebook's not really any good to me. Well, if that's the case, I've got you covered. Okay, here is my digital system for organizing files, and this works in every single job sector in the world. This one system will work for you. This is a system called PARA. Okay, and PARA stands for Projects, Areas, Resources, and Archives. My favorite thing about this system is that it is a fluid system that prioritizes decluttering areas. Okay, so you're never going to have a particular folder that just builds and builds and builds. Maybe archives, but the things you're working on are going to be stored in a clean, clear environment. That's the advantage of PARA. So what is it? What do these letters actually mean? Well, let's start with projects. Okay, so projects are things that you're actively working on, but they must have a deadline. So these are projects that at a certain point, they're going to be completed, and you know when that deadline is. So this could be writing a literature review, completing a certain batch of experiments, publishing a paper. The key is they are short-term and actionable. You're working towards them each day, and there is a timeline. Okay, there is an end in sight. The nice thing about projects is this is going to be where you're doing most of your work, but it's also going to be the cleanest, tidiest area of your file system, because when a project is completed, you simply drag the folder and move it from projects into archives. Okay, areas are up next. How do areas differ from projects? Well, the main thing is time. Okay, areas are things that you're working on, but they don't have a deadline. They're never going to end. These are continuous development things for you. You can think of them as long-term responsibilities. So a folder in areas could be called teaching, whereas a project might be a particular lecture. Once you've delivered it, it moves into archives. Could be things like research papers, could be things like health and fitness, finances, research, teaching. These are all folders that could sit in the areas. And remember, the main thing that differentiates them from projects is there's no end in sight. These are areas of continuous improvement of long-term responsibilities. Okay, then we come on to resources. Resources are things you might want to use later on, okay, as the name suggests. So maybe a folder under resources could be academic writing tips, academic presentation tips, could be where you store all the PDFs of the research papers that you need to read, and you can organize them within a folder system under that. Typically, these are non-urgent resources. Okay, things in the resources file are not urgent, and they are for reference. So typical rule of thumb, if it's useful but not urgent, it's a resource. That's where you put it. Okay, then we come to archives. Archives is the one that gets quite bloated, but it's the one you never really never really searching through it too much. Okay, this is where completed projects go once they're done. So finished projects, old lecture materials that you're not going to give anymore, or maybe you're not going to be doing that lecture for another year, you can move it into archives. Maybe you can move it back into projects later if you're doing it again or working with it again. So why does this system work so well? It completely reduces any friction. You don't have to guess where exactly you put things. You know, okay, was that a project I was working on? Then it's in projects. When did I finish that? Did I finish it? Okay, it's in archives. Is it a resource? Is it an error? You know where these things go. And this system is adaptable. It encourages action. Okay, it encourages you to actually regularly move things around and clean them up. So you never let one folder sit and stagnate and grow into this horrible thing that then a year down the line you need to go, oh, I need to take a whole day and just fix and tidy that folder. Nobody likes to do that. Okay, so my final tip is for people working in labs, okay, where you're generating physical samples. Some people tend to have this problem where they go, you know, I'm working a project for multiple years. I've produced so many samples. I then find the sample, or I stumble across it in the -80 2 years later, and I read the title of the experiment on the storage box, and I can't really remember what the samples are, what I did. How do I tie everything together? What's in my lab book to what's actually physically there in the lab? Well, here's my solution for that. It's called reverse date stamping. So let's say we ran an experiment on the 21st of October, 2023. We've got some samples, we put them into a -80 freezer box. What we need to do is put the date in reverse on that box. So you will put 2023, 10, 21 on the box, okay? Then on your computer, you will make a folder entitled 2023, 10, 21. Now, why do we do reverse date stamping? We do reverse date stamping so that if you have multiple folders made in this way, you can organize them by name, and that will automatically sort them from oldest to newest. Sometimes you see when you go into a folder and make a change, it will actually change the date modified tab. So if you try and organize by date modified, you're not actually organizing by when the experiments were done. It's just the last time you interacted with them. So that's why we do this reverse date stamping on the name. So you can switch from newest to oldest at a glance. So inside that folder, you might want to make these subfolders. Number 1, processed data. We want to have that at the top because it's the thing we're probably going to go back to most of the time. Number 2 will be raw data. So this is where you can put fluorescent images or raw data from machines. And then number 3, experimental design. This folder is really, really important. You might also have a 4th folder called report, or you could put this in the experimental design. You want the SOP to be in here for what you did. And if you can write a mini lab report as you complete these experiments, a mini introduction, mini methods, mini results, mini discussion, I'm talking really basic here, just so that in 3 years when you come back and look at this, when you look at the data, you can remember why you did that experiment. What were you trying to find out? Very, very useful, but it only works if you do it from the beginning. Another quick tip before we finish up, if you use an electronic lab book, something like OneNote was something I found really, really useful. And the main reason I find it useful is because I would use it sort of like a journal. So I would take a new page for every day. That means if I find some old samples and I look at the reverse date stamp, if I search that into my OneNote, if I find that day, I can find all the notes when I was setting up the experiment. How did I set up the plate? How did I set up the machine? What settings did I use? It's all stored there. And OneNote with its search function just completely beats traditional lab books to death. Okay, so if you're using a traditional lab book, you're missing out. Use OneNote instead. So what did you think of my system? What do you think of bullet journaling? Is it something you're going to use? What about the Para system? Do you think maybe that would help your horrific file system on your computer? And what about that reverse date stamping? Is that something you think you're going to use? Folks, let me know down in the comments below, okay? I want to know, do you think these are going to be useful? Do you think you'll use them? Maybe you have your own system that you think is better. If that's the case, then I want to hear from you down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit subscribe. That lets me know that these videos are enjoyable and to make more of them, okay?